Mud is probably favored in this matchup because here's a Cloud Post to start things off.
Yeah.
I would think so. I mean, I can't imagine these players have tested the matchup. I will say that, as there's a beautiful snow-covered island for Lamb. He'll get things started here in round number 10. A Cloud Post, and now a Vesuva here from Joseph.
So the thing about Mud is that Mud's really good, as are a lot of Cloud Post decks, at going over the top of a control deck. You know, look at his lands right now. He already has 4 mana in play to Lamb's 1. Mud's typically pretty good here. And you look at some of the control cards that Phan has. He has Lightning Bolt, Sudden Shock. These things are really going to be no help against the Mud strategy.
Chalice of the Void for 1, or at least it was an attempt. It got spell snared. Phan is just going to play a Scalding Tarn and pass the turn back. Wanted to make sure he knew exactly what Cloud Post and Vesuva does, which is generate a lot of mana. Cavernous Souls will come in here for Joseph. We'll see what it's naming. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Gullum, but it's actually going to be Construct, which will allow for a Kadoltha Forge Master.
Yeah, that guy is a Construct, so this is going to be uncounterable. And I think already off the bat, this matchup is tough for Phan. He's not playing white in his deck, so he doesn't even have Swords to Plowshares right now for the Forge Master. His removal is red, and really not equipped to deal with a 3/5. You look at the ways he can get this guy off the board, for example. But yeah, he could do double burn spell to it, I suppose. Outside of that, he's banking on counter spells really hard, and Cavern of Souls plus all this mana so quickly is going to be really hard for him to deal with.
Cavern is a nightmare for this deck. You know, Lamb's got a lot of counter magic. He has some removal, as you mentioned. He does have 1 Jace in his deck, but seeing a Cavern of Souls naming anything immediately has to be like an uh-oh. This is going to be hard for me to beat. And now Kadoltha Forge Master has shown up, and we know what that can do, both in Mud, in Legacy, and certainly in Vintage.
Yeah, one of the things I think that's a draw out of Phan's deck is that he's playing 3 copies of Sudden Shock. It's a really good concession to the Delver strategy. Cards like Delver and Stoneblade, really.
There's Wasteland. That'll take care of the Cavern of Souls, so no more counter magic here. You can see in Joseph's hand, he does have a copy of Staff of Domination. He also has a copy of Trinisphere that he is placing on the stack, trying to make things very difficult here for Lamb.
Yeah, fortunately for Phan, Joseph did not have another land, so if he has Spell Pierce, he can go ahead and pierce this. But yeah, Trinisphere, this has a bullseye on it. If this resolves, things are really tough for Phan.
Santomassino holding it high in the air saying, is this good? Is this good? Because if this is good, you're in a lot of trouble. It looks like it's good, and it is. It's an attack here for 3. Phan's going to go down to 16. We're going to head back his way.
Phan has very few ways to get that card off the board, so he's really going to be on 1 spell a turn for most of the game here.
This is exactly how Joseph wants things to go. He's going to play a copy of Glimmer Post. That'll get him 3 life. That'll also make those Cloud Posts tap for more mana.
Yeah, he gets to jump from 4 mana to 7 mana thanks to Glimmer Void. Glimmer Post, rather.
Let's see what the big spell's going to be now. Oh, Wormcoil Engine. Well then. We're just having a ball, aren't we? That's going to be a counter spell. Thankfully, if you're Phan, keep that thing off the table. Here comes the Forge Master. Phan's going to go down to 13.
So Phan can maybe counter spell his way through Joseph's remaining threats. A difficulty for him is going to just be actually getting rid of this Forge Master, though.
It's 3 damage every turn. Wow. Joseph just keeps casting really, really large spells. There's a Wasteland there for him. That one's probably pretty important.
Well, Wasteland's so huge here because the way that Phan gets Wormcoil off the board, or the Forge Master rather, off the board, is by playing 2 burn spells. He's going to have to play Lightning Bolt, or Bolt Sudden Shock, and if that's going to take 6 mana because of Trinisphere. So this Wasteland,
it's going to
really
be
strong.
Stifled. 3 mana Stifle to stop a Wasteland, which is just kind of a thing that he needs to do, but this opens up the door. No Force of Will when there's a Trinisphere in play, so Santomassino gets to cast some sort of very large spell here. Looks like it may just be another Forge Master. Again, he does have a copy of Staff of Domination in hand, so we'll see which one he elects to go with.
Yeah, Staff of Domination, pretty good in these style of decks, and that's what he's going to go for.
It has a lot of text. 5 abilities on the staff. And if you're unfamiliar, you're going to see them all right now.
Yeah, I think the short version of Staff of Domination is that if you have enough mana, this card does everything. And you probably have seen that if you play multiplayer formats. Decks that get to untap with 20 mana in this card, you don't really lose from there.
You do have the ability to go infinite with this card if you do have Metalwork and enough artifacts to satisfy that. So it does have a unique fit in this deck. It's also a 3rd artifact in play right now for Kadoltha Forge Master, which might be the most important thing out here. But Santomassino can just keep doing his thing, which is just attacking, and we'll see if Lamb can ever do anything about it.
Yeah, there is a Blightsteel Colossus that Santomassino can search up here if he wants to. It's not a bad idea for him to go for it, but I think his board is so safe right now that he's just going to keep attacking for 3 until Phan does something about it.
It's hard to pass it up. He's going to draw a card with the staff here. City of Traders looks to be the draw. He will deploy the city as his land for the turn.
Yeah, up to 9 mana. And this is tough. The key part to this game was that Trinisphere that was not able to be countered. Since then, it really doesn't seem like Phan can do much.
This looks like it's going to be a Chalice of the Void 4-1. Santomassino kind of explaining exactly how things work with Trinisphere, which is, boy, it's a lot of fun as far as rules are concerned.
Right, so Trinisphere makes spells that cost less than 3, cost 3 to cast them. However, it doesn't actually change the converted mana cost on them. So say I have a Chalice for Void on 1, you still won't resolve your Lightning Bolt. Even though you're paying 3 for it, the spell still has, when it's on a stack, has converted mana cost 1. So there's, a little bit going on there. It's really just they work well together out of the Mud deck.
My favorite part about Trinisphere is it only works if it's untapped, which is just kind of a wonky thing to say.
Trinisphere only works if it's untapped.
It's very clear on the card. If that thing is tapped, it's a no-go. So maybe that's the trick to try to beat it, is to get it tapped somehow. But a Spell Pierce was able to take care of the Chalice of the Void on 1. We saw the Forge Master attack yet again.
Well, see, if you know your Magic history, you know that continuous artifacts, when they become tapped, cease to work. You know, as the card Kill Switch would teach you, when it turns off all the artifacts.
It does. It kills them. So that's the trick. It's good flavor. As there's a Misty Rainforest and just a passing of the turn. Santomassino will untap and draw. He does have another Forge Master in the hand.
Just knowing it at home, that rule was gotten rid of a long time ago.
Yes.
So cards don't actually work that way.
Is a Sundering Titan. The 7-10 split here to try to destroy some lands. We'll see if this is going to resolve. It looks like Phan is going to sacrifice a Misty Rainforest. Don't know if he has another counterspell, but as we saw right away early in this game, Cavernous Souls is an absolute disaster. Right, for Phan, if it's in play. Fortunately for him, he had a Wasteland to get it off of the table, but you can see how powerful it would be. He defends himself with counter magic. That's what he does.
Yeah, he has a lot of it as well. But cards like Trinisphere are just really hard for him. Remember, the ways that he wins are through things like, Mistress Factory and Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage is really difficult once there's a Trinisphere in play. The card, you're going to need 6 mana to Snapcast anything.
This will be a dig through time. So we will take a look at a bunch of cards here. Probably looking for a counterspell. He does have the actual card counterspell in his deck. And there's a couple of red cards.
Well, he would like to have red cards to take care of the Forge Master. He has a Jace the Mind Sculptor that could take care of it. But then you go back to the end of this and you see the Staff of Domination with, what is it, now 9 mana from Santomassino. Phan doesn't really have Artifact Destruction in his deck. And that staff, he can't ignore it because it's going to create way too much value.
So Phan taking a long look at some cards here to try to figure out if there's something that he can find.
The difficulty is Phan may be able to survive this turn, but I'm not sure how his deck stabilizes from here. I don't know, he needs the ability to clean up Santomassino's board, and his deck's really not well equipped to do that.
Yeah, clearly he can't find it. He's going to concede the game. So Joseph Santomassino with his Mud deck is going to win game number 1 here over Lamb Phan, playing a blue-red land still. We will turn our attention to the sideboard. We will start with Lamb. He does have 2 copies of Engineered Explosives, 4 copies of Relic of Progenitus, 2 copies of Surgical Extraction, a Flusterstorm, a Red Elemental Blast, 2 Pyroblasts, and 3 copies of Pyroclasm. What you won't find here is Artifact Destruction.
This matchup just seems really difficult for Lamb. His sideboard's not going to offer really enough help, I don't think, here. So board and Engineered Explosives, maybe it's okay. He only has 2 colors of mana in his deck, so he can't actually put it on 3 either.
Yeah, he's straight blue-red. Sometimes you'll find, you'll find decks with explosives that might have, just throw an Underground Scene here so I can set it at 3 or something like that. Kind of a free roll with some costs associated with it due to Wasteland, but you don't find that here. There's 4 volcanic islands, 2 snow-covered islands, 1 snow-covered mountain, a bunch of fetch lands, fairy conclaves, and some colorless lands. So that's a no-go. And that's an issue here, as again, you're going to find no artifact removal. For Santomassino's sideboard, he's got a lot of options, which you have in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, Santomassino, there's not too much he needs to do here. This is a great matchup for him. So he has like a lot of different artifacts in his sideboard that he can use. The one I'm excited about here is actually, this is a rare from Ravnica. He has Bottled Cloister in his sideboard.
Ooh.
Now, if you may not be familiar with this card, it's basically lets you draw 2 cards a turn. It costs 4. Now, the danger with the card is that during your opponent's turn, it exiles your entire hand. So if your opponent blows up your Bottled Cloister, you lose your entire hand. But Phan's deck can't actually do that. It can't, once the artifact's down, it doesn't have a way to blow it up. And Santomassino may or may not know that, but this card, if resolved, would just draw him an extra card every turn.
Trust me, I'm very familiar with the Bottled Cloister. A very powerful sideboard card that players do opt to use. As you mentioned, if it does die, it's kind of a disaster. But if it doesn't, and as we know, Lamb can't kill it if it gets into play, it'll generate a very large advantage, much like we saw with Staff of Domination, too. You know, these are very powerful artifacts. In this Mud deck, you're able to generate a lot of value from it. In Staff's case, you can actually just infinite combo if things line up appropriately. But for Lamb, again, he doesn't have artifact removal in his deck, so there's nothing he can really do about this. We've seen players playing cards like Smash the Smithereens, Smelt, Shattering Spree. None of that here from Lamb still.
Yeah, Bottled Cloister has been an interesting card out of these decks. It also, and this one isn't as relevant here, but gives you a lot of defense against discard spells, because on your opponent's turn, you actually don't have a hand. So that won't come up here. Lamb doesn't have any discard, but I think Santomassino brings that in. Outside of that, I don't see Joseph really needing to change anything. His deck was dominant game 1, and really, the plan one, you know, his main deck plan worked so well that I don't see him changing too much of it.
Yeah, I don't expect to see a ton of changes. I like bringing the Cloister in, maybe for a card like Spine of Ishak, because I'm not sure if he needs that expensive effect in this particular matchup. It is great against, you know, decks like Sneak and Show, and I suppose it's fine against blue decks like this, but I'm not sold that he needs it in this matchup. But I'm with you. I don't think he needs to change very much. If you're Joseph, this is part of the reason you played this deck.
Right, you play this deck, right. Maybe he doesn't need Platinum Angel. He can, you know, that's not gonna get him there in this matchup. Yeah. You may see him use something like a Lightning Greaves out of the sideboard in that spot. Shroud could be great for some of his creatures. But yeah, by and large, this matchup looks good.
Yeah, I think, again, this is why you played this deck, probably to beat up on decks like this, and your Jeskai Stoneblade decks of the world, and your Delver Secrets, just your blue decks that are trying to get the job done with Forcible is what Mud can be good against. It was very, very good in game 1. We'll see if it's good here in game number 2, as Phan does have a snow-covered mountain to start things off. Santomassino with a Wasteland. Can't take care of that basic, as he will pass the turn back.
As we saw here, Lamb needs to really keep the board clean, because there are a lot of cards that when Santomassino resolves, he cannot knock off the board, and he can't really play through. So we saw Trinisphere certainly seemed that way. Correctly set Chalice of the Void could be that way. Staff of Domination, I think, also fits that category. So there's about 9 cards that Phan just cannot let resolve, which is troublesome for him right now because he started off on 2 lands, neither of which are blue.
Mishra's Factory is the card that Santomassino wanted to read just to make sure he knew exactly what it does. Powerful artifact creature land, as here is a Lightning Greaves. Glimmer Post is going to bring Joseph up to 21.
Yeah, so Phan can let that one happen. I think he can let that through, but he cannot let anything through. He has to get every counterspell. If he even misses one, it could cost him the game.
Here's a Wasteland. Going to go after the Wasteland. I think it's very interesting, too, about what card and what land you're supposed to kill with that Wasteland. You're supposed to take down Glimmer Post and lower the Locust counter. You're supposed to take down Wasteland to protect your own mana base. He opted to go with Wasteland. There is another Locust and a second Glimmer Post, but no Cloud Post just yet.
It looks like Phan has kept a hand of Factory, Mountain, and 3 Wastelands. So he's gonna try to waste Santomassino out of this game while dealing 2.
He's going to fire up the Factory and attack here for 2. I'm actually surprised with him doing that with a Mountain and not Wasteland. I actually like the game plan of just waste you, hope you don't draw lands, hope your deck fails.
Yeah, I mean, if he lets Joseph get to 4, Joseph can play Lodestone Golem equipped with Lightning Greaves, and then suddenly Phan's strategy just seems done for here.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're going to see. Here is Lodestone Golem. Lamb's going to take a look at his hand. Now he needs to have a card like Force of Will, and you can see he knows he's in some trouble now.
I said before, he can't let a single spell through.
Yeah.
Every single one can kill him.
Lodestone Golem can certainly do it. That is a Force of Will.
Yeah, these are all...
You can barely tell.
He has blacked out... So I just want to comment here what's happened with this Force of Will. It looks like he's blacked out the background of the Force of Will and whited out the border.
Yeah.
So, first I was like, that's not a Force of Will. I mean, it sure doesn't look like one.
There's a double Wasteland, and now he's going to attack. So the mana base, he has set Santomassino way far back. You talk about Lamb's deck and the altars to it. One of the things I really kind of pride myself on is being able to see the cards and snipe them right away. I'm having some real difficulty here with his
he's
deck.
also whited out the borders of the Wastelands.
Yeah.
It looks like he's blacked out the background of all his cards. Now, I'm wondering what the Mishra's Factory. It's not blacked out.
It's too nice. Got to leave that one alone.
I mean, we did it to Force of Wills and Wastelands. Like, what's the bar here?
I guess, yeah, where do we draw the line?
Sure.
Well, that's his win condition. You can't touch the win condition. Ooh, a surgical extraction.
I actually like it on the lightning bolts. That looks really nice.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the charms of Legacy tournaments is, if you guys have never been to a Legacy Grand Prix before, here, this extraction is going to target Ancient Tomb. You'll see a hand here of Kadoltha Forge Master, a Sundering Titan, a Wormcoil Engine, a Lodestone Golem, another Forge Master, so two of those, a Grim Monolith, and a Vesuva. But some of the charm of the Legacy Grand Prix is when you go, players, they just dust off their beautiful decks, and we saw Eli Cassis's deck yesterday, and you'll see some insanely nice decks and nice collections at this tournament.
Yeah. So I just want to run through the game plan that Phan has gone on here. He's mono land destruction. He is surgicaling Ancient Tombs. He is triple wastelanding his opponent. You do see that Santomassino has a Vesuva and a Grim Monolith, so he still might be able to get a spell out in time. And that's because this Landstill deck has no tempo to it. Its win con is Mishra's Factory.
Yeah.
But that said, Phan, this strategy may work this game as off the wall as it really is for this deck. The idea that Landstill can deny you off lands the entire game is not guaranteed at all. This is kind of, I think, a perfect storm for Lamb. He may get game 2 this way, but the idea that he could pull this off twice is pretty low probability.
Well, I 100% agree with you that the probability of this happening is very low. Here's the thing, and here's why I like what Lamb is doing, is because he's come up with a game plan.
Yeah.
Now, is the game plan great? Well, that's hard to say, but it's a game plan. And we know that he doesn't have artifact removal in his sideboard. We know that he has the counter, as you mentioned, every single spell. So he's got to get creative to try to win this match. And if that means surgical extractioning something after you wastelanded, well, hey, there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, just to show how fragile it is here, Joseph Santomassino's land for the turn was Vesuva, copying Glimmer Post, and that gained 2, so that was a time walk.
Yep.
It's he has blown up a lot of lands here, so.
There's Chalice of the Void. That's going to be an attempt to set it for 1. That'll lock out some of the spells, and it looks like that's going to be in.
Yeah, I think Lamb has multiple lightning bolts here. Santomassino had a choice between Chalice for 1 and Grim Monolith. You see that he's not actually concerned about only being on 13 life.
There's an Engineered Explosives. That is set for 0.
Yeah. Chalice of the Void, how X spells work here is that when it's on the stack, it has converted mana cost 2. So, you could spell snare Chalice of the Void on 1, but now that it's on the table, it has converted mana cost to 0, so that Engineered Explosives will blow it up.
Lamb's going to slow down here and wants to leave the mana available so you can blow up the Engineered Explosives. Here is Grim Monolith, a little bit of mana acceleration. Goodbye, Chalice.
And Santomassino with that Grim Monolith, he's pulling out of the mana denial. He gets 1 spell here, because Grim Monolith taps for 3 just once. It doesn't untap, so he gets 1 shot at a good spell. He has to hope it doesn't get, say, Force of Willed.
There's a Volcanic Island. That's a 3rd land here from Lamb.
Yep.
You can see he's got a Brainstorm, a couple of red cards there. They look like they are Lightning Bolts. A Treasure Cruise is actually in hand as well. So he's finally found blue mana. The question now is, does he want to fire up the factory and keep going that route, or does he want to try to develop his board or develop his hand with this Brainstorm?
Well, so there's a lot of questions. How long can Phan play defense for? We've already kind of established he has to counter everything. Yep. Now his hand is okay at doing that. I mean, his counter spells are really just not well matched up for this. Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, these aren't really what you want against Kadoltha Forge Masters.
He's going to pass the turn back. 2 mana, Chalice for 1 again.
Well, I think that turned on a Spell Snare in Phan's hand, so that's going to be pretty good for him.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because it turns on the spell snare, but it's like, ah, man, I wish I could have got those 2 points of damage in. But it was probably correct just to hold steady this turn and see what happens, react to what your opponent does. He wants to be able to keep pressuring the opponent and say, okay, 2, you leave mana up, 2, you leave mana up. But I think because he saw Santomassino's hand last turn, or a couple turns ago from the extraction, he knows that Santomassino has 2 copies of Forge Master. He's got 2 bolts and 2 red mana now, so he'd probably want to induce the use of the Grim Monolith. The 2 mana plus the Grim Monolith, that'll bring you to 3. Santomassino plays his Forge Master, maybe tries to equip it to the Lightning Greaves. You double bolt it, it's gone, and now the Monolith is gone too. I imagine that was his plan this turn, but Chalice came off the top of the deck.
The bolts are just lava spikes here. I don't think Pham has any illusion that they're going anywhere other than upstairs.
Okay.
Well, maybe not. He didn't fire him off.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to shoot one on end step there.
Don't get a great look at the draw of that turn. Looks like it may have been a copy of Force of Will.
It's so hard with all this altering.
That's the white bordered blacked out card. So I've got a feeling that's Force of Will. I know this is a Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, what I like here, he actually doesn't. Yeah, he only has to use the blue mana.
Yeah.
He was waiting to cruise until he hadn't made a land drop this turn so that he could cruise and then draw a blue source and play another one.
Yep.
He has to find it. You see Sudden Shock. There we go. Volcanic Island and Snow-Covered Island.
I was going to say it's not an absolute certainty that he'll draw a blue producing land there, but I think it is worth the risk.
That's like the situations where you're on a 1-lander in Legacy and you cast a Brainstorm when you don't have another land, hoping, hey, if I hit this fetch land, this will be beautiful.
Yep.
And then if you hit no lands, then you Brainstorm lock yourself and lose the game.
Yeah, it's an absolute disaster.
But I think it's a risk he needs to take here. He has to keep developing while he has Santomassino, under his boot right now. Like, Massino's going to break free eventually, so Phan's got to make the most of these turns.
Yeah, I think he has to take risky lines and risky sideboarding and surgical extraction, risky plays like surgical extraction and Ancient Tomb. I mean, lines that we typically wouldn't see, creative angles that he has to take, because he is in a horrible matchup. Game 1, Santomassino won very easily, and things just don't line up great here for Phan, so he has to get very creative, as here's a Metalworker off of the Grim Monolith.
Yeah, so Pham does have 8 points of burn in his hand right now. 2 Lightning Bolts and a Sudden Shock.
Yep.
Now, fortunately here, Joseph, not only did he cast Metalworker, but he used his Grim Monolith mana to cast it, and Pham answered it with Sudden Shock, which is a huge feather in his cap here. Now, the Monolith is tapped, and Santomassino didn't resolve a backbreaking spell.
Now he's back down to 2 mana, just those 2 copies of Glimmer Post. Monolith, you're staying tapped. Don't even think about it, Joseph. As now Lamb can kind of try to turn the corner, and you mentioned those Lightning Bolts may be reserved for the Dome. I think you're right. Now, you can see Lamb, his pace of play has picked up quite a bit now. He knows it.
He knows his opponent is at a real low life total. But once again, Vesuva gains Santomassino 3 life. It's just... There's just so many incidental things in this matchup that are terrible for Lamb Phan. Not only does Joseph get to draw a land, but lands game 3, and that's more damage than Phan even deals in a turn.
Well, he's going to deal 2 more here, I think, in just a moment, though he is reaching for some mana. Aha! Standstill will make an appearance. Okay.
I like this card. I'm sad we don't see more of it in Legacy.
I'm like the biggest Standstill fan.
It's so interactive.
When I was young and this card came out, I was like, I want to build a Standstill deck, and I was very bad then, so my opponent kept drawing 3 cards, not me, but I was the biggest fan of this card.
I remember the first time I played against this card in Legacy, I cast a spell to break the Standstill, and then I tried to stifle the Standstill trigger, and then I was informed that I'm terrible at this game because don't do that, in case you're wondering. It doesn't work well. I mean, the stifle resolves, and you do stifle the trigger. Unfortunately, you just make another one.
Yes. A Lightning Bolt is going to take care of the Metalworker before it can wear the Greaves. Now that is a big land. That's a Cloud Post. There are 4 Locusts in play. That taps for 4 mana. Lamb needs a Wasteland.
Joseph has broken free.
Yep.
Now
he needs a Wasteland.
Or he needs a lot of burn.
Yep. There's a Fairy Conclave. And he does have a Snapcaster Mage. And we also know he has a Lightning Bolt in his hand. So, that's a virtual 6 points of damage right now.
Yeah, he has a huge number of cards. I think Pham should be able to put this together. I think
so.
He should be able to get there.
Santomassino is going to draw a card. He's got a lot of mana now, though, so now he can start casting his Haymakers, potentially 2 spells in 1 turn, depending on how things do line up. But you can see Lamb's a little bit worried. I would be, too. This is a Worm Coil Engine.
Pham has to win, but he has to, bolt, Snapcaster Bolt, probably Force of Will.
Yeah. He does have one of those, Force of Will. Removing a blue card. He'll take 1 to take care of the 6/6 Lifelinker. That does also have Death Touch.
And this should be lethal. He can go bolt, he can snapcast that bolt, and then attack with Fairy Conclave, Snapcaster Mage, and Mishra's Factory. And that should be lethal.
And he's showing him right now. He says, Snapcaster Mage, I will Lightning Bolt you. I will show you
Here's
another
another
Lightning
bolt.
Bolt.
Yep.
That's going to do it. Phan is going to win game number 2 here over Joseph Santomassino. Yeah, it's really hard. We can't say it enough. This matchup is so bad for Lamb, but he's found a way to get at least one game.
I'll tell you, all the other players, all these Delaware players and Stoneforge players, if Phan can take down the Mud guy in the undefeated bracket, I think the rest of the players in the undefeated bracket will just be really happy to see that guy gone.
They should be buying him breakfast
and
everything else.
Just,
thank you, Lamb. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wait, hold on. You have Sudden Shock and Lightning Bolt in your deck? Wait, no, I don't want to thank you.
Yeah, I suppose like the Lancel deck's not that much better.
No.
I
mean, he's 9-0. You know you have to beat some Delver decks and some Stoneblade decks on the way.
He's main decking 4 Lightning Bolts, 3 Sudden Shocks, and 3 Snapcaster Mage.
He's also got 4 Stifles, a card that no one has had to play against this week, and you have to imagine. Stifle is not a thing, really, in Legacy anymore. We talked about how Wasteland has, declined quite a bit. Stifles, think about it. I mean, Teamer Delver was the big Stifle deck. That deck is, basically non-existent, and so now Stifle is non-existent as a result. I imagine he's caught a lot of people off guard with that one.
Well, what I like is that he's playing Stifle, Wasteland, Snapcaster Mage on Stifle, and I think the guys he will punish in the XO bracket if he makes it through this match are these Jeskai Stoneblade players. Because these players, and we talked about this yesterday with what a lot of the pro teams have been doing, they wanted to be Blue-Red Delver, and they ran these really fragile mana bases because they said, hey, no one's going to Wasteland me today, or maybe some people will, but the Blue-Red guys aren't going to. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to play the best cards. And yeah, my mana will be shaky, but as long as no one messes with it, I just get to play all the best cards for free.
Yeah. You talk about that in the Blue-Red Delver decks, too. Blue-Red Delver decks typically have 16 lands. I talked to Tom Martell. He said, I'm playing 15 lands. I don't care. No one's messing with my mana. Oh, well, that's sort of true. Hope he doesn't get paired against the Lamb later today. He'll be messing with it a lot. It'll be very hard for Martell to win, I do imagine. But right now for Lamb, he's got to get another game of this match. For Joseph, he clearly wants to get this game. One of these players are going to move on to 10-0. I still think it's heavily in favor of Joseph, especially because he's on the play for game 3.
So I have to say, though, as far as like which deck I would cheer for in this matchup or the kind of style I'd like to see advance, I'm pretty torn here. I have to say,
okay.
Yeah. So first of all, I like the level of non-interaction that Mud has. I like it when people just do powerful things. It's kind of like in Modern, right? Tron's a really good deck, and I've played it a couple times. I played a side event with it the other day because I went to a PTQ, didn't do so well, asked my friends if they had a deck, got to play Tron, and I respected the deck. It's almost like a combo deck, and I got to do really powerful things. I don't think, I'd want to play it over, say, a card like Manamorphose, but Tron's cool.
Okay.
And Cloudpost is like the Tron deck of Legacy, really.
Absolutely.
That said, I also really like, this Landstone deck's really sweet. I like how it just does nothing. It has one goal, and that is all in on that. My goal is to do absolutely nothing.
I was going to say, it seems like you like doing nothing more than doing something, but I do like your ranges are either doing nothing or comboing your opponent, which feels like you're doing everything.
I think the best way to put it is that the kind of decks I don't like are the ones where what I'm trying to do changes every single turn. It's like, like Jeskai Stoneblade. That's when I'm like, well, sometimes I'm combo, sometimes I'm an aggro deck, sometimes I'm a control. It's like, I want to do one thing, and I want to do it really well. And I think both these decks fall into that category. They have one game plan.
Yeah, no, they do one thing, and they do it really, really well. That's the reason both these players are 9-0 with their innovative decks. You see Phan is taking a mulligan here. Santomassino kept very, very quickly. I'm not surprised to see Lamb taking a mulligan. He needs to mulligan very aggressively and find the appropriate cards in hand because he can't keep, a sketcher and hope everything comes together. He's got to have the answers right away.
I'm not even sure what he's looking for. So to me, game 2 seemed like a perfect storm for Phan. If I were to describe what is it going to take for Phan to win, I think he can't actually, he's going to have a handful of great counter spells. Maybe I guess one way he could win is if he just starts on island to island. He spell snares Joseph's 2-drop, he counter spells the next one, then he Snapcaster spell snares the next one, then he counter spells the next one, then he plays a standstill. Joseph has to break it, then he force of wills it. So this is like one path to victory. It's the literal Lamb counters everything game.
Yep.
Which when he's on the draw on 6 is hard. And then I guess the other way he wins is kind of he has to cheese Joseph because first of all these stifles don't do anything, so he's gonna have to just wasteland him out of the game off the natural 4 copies of Wasteland, which happened game 2, to be fair.
Yep.
But in a situation that Phan doesn't do out of these things, Joseph just runs away with the games.
I think Wasteland is so important here for Lamb. He's hoping Joseph probably starts off with a cloud post and he wastelands it, and maybe that messes up his development. Lamb does not look thrilled about the hand he's looking at, but we are underway. There's the cloud post. The question now is, does he have the wasteland?
The card cloud post is probably the most difficult thing about this matchup for Lamb Phan. Lands that tap for 3, if you just want to sit back on islands and do nothing, you don't want your opponent to have lands that tap for 3.
Well, there's a second cloud post, so one wasteland would not have been good enough. This is bad news.
This is a nightmare here already.
Gonna tap this cloud post for 2. There's a chalice for 1.
Spell, snare, spells. Remember, he has to counter everything. So now that's our game plan. The counter
snare
everything.
Or pierce, either one is going to get the job done. He's going to search for a snow-covered island.
You probably pierce it if you have them both, even though spell snare is usually the more conditional card, just because I don't know if you're ever going to get to spell pierce anything again.
This is a brainstorm.
That's not the counter spells. This is just gonna resolve.
Yeah, 2 standstills and a bolt. Lamb is probably looking for a card like Force of Will here. As you mentioned, he's in some serious trouble.
He's putting back the 1-drops.
Yep.
Because this chalice is gonna hit the board.
It's in. I think it's gonna be in. We'll see in just a second.
Remember, Joseph Santomassino's Mud deck does not play any 1-mana spells.
The chalice is in on 1. That'll shut off a healthy amount of Phan's cards.
Yeah, he has already 1 Lightning Bolt stranded in hand. His top card is a fetch land, and then below that is a Brainstorm, so he's gonna crack the fetch land. He doesn't want to draw Brainstorm with a chalice on the table.
It's interesting. He may crack fetch land. I think the land back there, yeah, that's a wasteland. And so this is interesting because I think he's going to play that and kill a cloud post, which I like, because that sends him, Joseph, from 4 mana back to 1.
It's a big cost here. Because he made that play, that means he has to, that cost him his next turn's draw. He can't really blow up artifacts. Maybe if he finds engineer explosives he can, but he's going to have to draw Brainstorm. And I'm wondering if he had that wasteland in his hand, it might have been worth it for him to just take turn 1 wastelanding away cloud post.
I was a little surprised not to see that.
Like I said, that specific card is the thing he has to be most worried about. It doesn't even really matter what Joseph's casting off these cloud posts. As long as he's using all the mana he's making, then pretty much every card in his deck is, like I said, everything has to be countered. There's no, oh, well, I can let this guy through. I can let this Kuldotha Forge Master through. So, no, you really can't. It's going to go get something you can't deal with. You can't let Wormcoil through. You can't let Sundering Titan through. I guess you could let a Metalworker through.
I guess. I mean, I'm not thrilled about it.
I don't like it. I'll let it through. Maybe you can let Lodestone Golem through.
Let's see what this is going to be. The Grim Monolith. That's in. 3 mana. There is Metalworker.
Just too much stuff, too fast.
Now going to pass the turn back. Phan's going to draw that Brainstorm he knows on top of his deck.
Ugh.
Can't cast it. Well, I suppose he can. Chalice of Void is a trigger that Santomassino does have to remember, so we might see things come down to that.
You can throw spells into the Chalice of the Void to build Storm as well. Not that that's... I don't think there's a reason for Phan to do that. He could throw cards into it so that he could treasure cruise them if he wanted.
It's true as well.
Which, if things are getting to that point, that's not really typically where you want things to be, but...
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
When the matchup is this bad, I mean, he's casting a standstill right now where the opponent has a creature on the table. Again, whatever it takes.
Yeah, it's tough because the ways he removes a creature are Sudden Shock and Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt doesn't work anymore, and I actually think that Lamb's just not going to remove Metalworker. His game plan here is to, well, he has to counter everything, and so far there's not a threat. But here is a whole boatload of spells he's going to have to counter.
Trinisphere, Lightning Greaves, and Lodestone Golem. That's 6 mana there for Metalworker. And Santomassino, I like this. He's just saying, okay, you have a Sandstone in play. I'm going to keep casting my spells. I'm going to wish you the best of luck to counter all of them because you have to.
Yeah, it's 9 mana, so there's 2 spells here. Lamb cannot let the Trinisphere or the Lodestone Golem resolve, I don't think.
Volcanic Island, Lightning Bolts, Engineered Explosives.
Well, if he can counter this Trinisphere, the cool part is that explosives will let him blow up the Chalice, which means then his bolts can take care of Lodestone Golem. So now he really only has to counter this card. Unfortunately, he can't, which, as we kind of saw game 1, once the Trinisphere is down, I don't know what Lamb does at this point. He can't get it off the field. As we mentioned, he does not have a 3rd color for Engineered Explosives. He doesn't have artifact removal either. This could just be the end of the game for him.
So 6 mana from the Metalworker, -3. Trinisphere is in play. 3 -3. Now Greaves is in play because it costs 3 mana, not 2.
Right.
So 3, 4, 5. So 5, because he taps City of Traders, so 5 -3 is 2 mana. 2 mana left here.
Yeah, he does not have enough to cast the Golem.
Unless he has a land. He hasn't played a land just yet. And you see the counting that's taking place here. So if Santomassino does have a land, which it looks like he does in City of Traders, that'll come in. City of Traders are going to bite the dust. We'll see what the Cavern does name. He actually has exactly enough to play a Lodestone Golem, make it uncounterable. There that is.
Can you confirm if I have Golem and Trinisphere in play, does everything cost 12 now? Or is it still just 3?
Now there's a interesting interaction here between Lodestone Golem and Trinisphere, where it's okay, does everything cost 3? Does everything cost 4? And the typical rule of thumb, at least what I have been told by all judges, is Trinisphere wins. It wins, it
3.
wins, it wins, yes.
3/3/3.
Trinisphere says, I always win. I'm a big rules pain in the butt.
Trinisphere certainly is winning right now.
Yes, it is.
And yeah, the thing that Lamb had to do this game was he had to counter everything. And
Much like the last game.
much like last game, he has to, and he's let too many cards through. He doesn't have a reset button. You know, he doesn't have a sweeper or anything to do at this point. And I think you'll see Santomassino get the game as a result.
Somebody needs a Pulverize. That would be nice.
Shatterstorm,
Yeah.
Vandal Blast.
Well, see, those are so expensive. Pulverize, sacrifice 2 mountains, freebie. We'll have to pay mana, of course, because Trinisphere is in play, but that would have to be, I think, the card. Now, of course, taking a look at Phan's deck list, he doesn't have that card, so he's in a world of trouble right now. The only comfort he can take, I think, right now is that Santomassino has no cards in his hand.
Yeah, I think sometimes what I've seen from a landstill deck is if they want that 3rd mana for Engineer Explosives, they actually go for a tropical island, and then they can also play an Ancient Grudge or 2 in the sideboard.
Yep.
That's not uncommon. It would be obviously great if Phan had those. He does not.
Now, the tough part here, I think, for Lamb is he's going from 13 to 12 with this fetch because now it's a 2-turn clock. Before it was a 3-turn clock because I think he's going to play Engineer Explosives here.
Yeah, it's an Engineer Explosives on 0, but
Okay, it's actually going to be a snappy. All right. A little surprised.
Can't cast anything.
Yeah.
Can't. That's a 2/1. Coral Merfolk. That's a blocker.
It's better than nothing.
Does something.
There's a Glimmer Post. It's going to come in. 2 Locusts in play. Looks like somebody's going to go reaching for some mana.
To be fair, if Phan can take some damage this turn, he could play another Snapcaster Mage and then just block Lodestone Golem.
It's all about having a strategy, right?
Just block it.
Here comes the Metalworker, too.
If he has another creature that could... Oh, that's so gross. Yeah, you could play a 2/1 for 3. Then you could play another 2/1 for 3.
Trade with the Lodestone Golem.
And then trade with his 5/3.
What a turn.
Whew.
Look, here's the thing. Lamb is going to have to get unbelievably lucky. He's going to have Santomassino draw lands, quite a few of them, or cards like Grim Monolith or additional Trinisphere, stuff like that to get himself out of the situation. Pyroclasm was the draw for the turn. Trust me when I say it's not going to be pretty here, but he's trying to figure something out.
He's going to have to play the rest of the game under Trinisphere. If he can counter everything for a long time, you're right. Joseph's going to have a lot of draws that don't do anything.
Is this going to be the Explosives or perhaps the Pyroclasm? We'll see. It's going to be an Explosives. That'll be on 2.
That does work.
Yep. Yeah, and he knows the interactions with Trinisphere. You can tell that right away. It's very counterintuitive what has to happen here, but all you can say is he's trying.
Interestingly enough, something you should note is that you may think he'd want to blow up the Chalice of the Void, but it's actually going to be impossible for him to blow up Chalice of the Void with Engineered Explosives.
Yep.
Because Trinisphere will make it cost at least 3, and unfortunately, Phan does not have 3 colorless lands, so he he more or less has to engineer explosives for at least one when he casts it.
Sunburst is always going to be satisfied. Now, this is bad. This is bad news because Joseph's having a bunch of mana, which means he didn't draw land. Yeah, there's a Spine of Isha.
7 mana, kill that Coral Merfolk.
Yeah.
Should be good enough.
That is not a land, my friends. And Lamb is going to take a look at his hand. He'll see a Pyroclasm and some other tools, but he has been stopped from being able to cast them, and that is going to do it. Joseph Santomassino is going to win this match. A thumbs up and a smile on his face. He is 10-0 here in New Jersey.
Yeah. Mud doing really well in this bracket. This was one of the more lopsided matches we've seen this tournament. I'm really excited for Lamb Fan. He did pick up his first loss. Landstill is a great deck, and I wish him the best of luck in winning out to make it into the top 8 tier. Hopefully we get to cover him again. I do like the deck, but then again, Mud's a contender here, and you can see why, because when your opponents are playing these soft permission spells, these cards like Lightning Bolt, like Spell Pierce,